TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations. Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, Jerusalem's top defense official labels Tehran as the steering hand behind all conflicts directed toward Israel. CENTCOM Commander General Michael Kurilla voices concern over China's and Russia's growing roles throughout the Middle East. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad asserts that World War III had already commenced. Israel's security establishment remains unyieldingly persistent in uprooting terror elements from throughout the West Bank districts of Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley. As part of Operation Wisebreaker, IDF, ISA, or Shin Bet, and Border Police Special Operations units conducted counter-terror activities throughout the aforementioned territories overnight, during the course of which a total of 16 suspected terror operatives were apprehended. During two of the cited operations, the arrest of suspected terror operatives prompted violent riots by local youth, to which the Israeli troops responded with crowd dispersal means. Thankfully, no injuries were reported to the Israeli forces. Meanwhile, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stressed that the steering hand behind all conflicts and terror-related activities which are directed against Israel is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Speaking at the Operations Forum of the IDF, Jerusalem's top defense official highlighted that the Islamic Republic's steering hand forces Israel's security establishment to treat all theaters as one collective threat.
פריבילגיה שהייתה למדינת ישראל להגיד זו מלחמה מוגבלת ואנחנו נילחם עם עזה או נילחם עם גזרה מסוימת ביהודה ושומרון, המציאות הזאת לדעתי הולכת ועוברת מהעולם. כשאתה מסתכל על הדברים, יש לנו לחימה בגזרה הצפונית, בסוריה, חדירות גבול מלבנון עם פוטנציאל להסלמה, כל מה שאתם מכירים ביהודה ושומרון, מה שקורה בעזה וחיכוכים בעלייה או בירידה בתוך תחומי הקו הירוק, בסוף כשאתה מסתכל על כל הדבר הזה, יש מאחוריו יד מכוונת, גם אם לא מדובר על פקודות לביצוע. וזה האיראנים.
Defense Minister Gallant went on to address the question related to Iran's interests in operating in all Israel's fronts.
עכשיו, מה זה משרת את האיראנים? בשני דברים. אחד, יצירת מלחמת התשה, הקזת דם וקניית זמן. שתיים, בזמן שקונים, מפתחים נשק גרעיני ויכולת כלכלית על מנת לייצר עוצמה ממול זה. ולכן, גם אם זה נראה זירות מבודלות, אנחנו נלחמים נגד ראש תמנון שיושב באיראן וזרועות שמנסות לגעת בנו.
While Israel continues to operate tirelessly against Iran's malign activities throughout the region, including most notably on the military and diplomatic fronts, there is an evident sense of an existing gap between the Biden administration's sense of urgency and that of the U.S. military, which voices concerns about the threats which emanate from the Islamic Republic. Speaking at a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing, which was held on March 16th in Washington, D.C., Commander of the U.S. Military Central Command, General Michael Kurilla, highlighted that Iran remains the primary destabilizing element in the region, which threatens both the United States and its regional partners. General Kurilla, who is the top U.S. officer in charge of the Greater Middle East Area of Responsibility, or AOR, further stressed the upward trajectory of threats which emanate from the Islamic Republic over the course of the past 2 years.
Iran's malign behavior has increased in the last 2 years, Senator. So as we look at the threat mainly that we face is the ballistic missile and their UAV threat in the region. One of the ways that we are countering that is through regional agreements and a regional architecture. As we go towards an integrated air and missile defense in the region, we are making progress on that. If there's one area in the world, I believe, that can derail the national defense strategy, it is currently the CENTCOM AOR.
The CENTCOM commander, during the Q&A session of the hearing, was asked further to address a report which he submitted in which he warned that Iran was no longer deterred vis-à-vis the United States, which effectively triggered a rise of attacks against U.S. forces throughout the region.
Currently, right now, we see their malign activity is increasing. We see them again in the last 90 days. We have some of the highest numbers of our advanced conventional weapons and munitions that we've seen going from Iran to Yemen. We see their attacks on our U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria increasing, and we see the threat streams that I can talk about in a higher classification. I can't say the exact reason why they feel that, but I know right now when I look at them, I believe they are undeterred.
Well, General Kurilla naturally stopped short from making any political statements related to the cause of Iran's emboldened activities. Republican Senator Tom Cotton, who posed the previous line of questioning, pointed to the fact that the loss of deterrence essentially coincided with the Biden administration taking office a little over 2 years ago. And while U.S. officials had repeatedly highlighted Washington's intentions to maintain a presence in the Middle East, a number of political decisions that were enacted by the Biden administration since its first days in office were interpreted by Washington's regional partners as American efforts to disengage from the Middle East. Among others, the referred to decisions include the American administration's initial declaration to pivot eastward amid strategic competition vis-à-vis China, which also included, of course, the decision to disengage from Afghanistan, alongside its choice to revoke the Trump administration's terror designation of the Iranian-backed Houthi militia, or Ansar Allah, despite repeated attacks against U.S. partners in the Gulf, coupled with the Biden administration's fixation to revive the so-called 2015 nuclear agreement with Iran, or JCPOA, at almost any cost. As a result, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia agreed to normalize relations with Iran as part of a Chinese brokered deal. And while the rapprochement between Tehran and Riyadh is seemingly troubling for both Washington and Jerusalem, General Kurilla highlighted that a gap remains between reaching an agreement and its implementation. Nevertheless, China's growing role in the region is a source of concern for both practitioners in Washington as well as officers at the U.S. Central Command.
I believe this is the talks about opening diplomatic relations, so much as this is not an alliance between Saudi Arabia and Iran. They have had diplomatic relations in the past while they were still shooting at each other in the past. So this is really about opening embassies and opening diplomatic relations when they closed the embassies back in 2016. What this does do, though, is with China, the most concerning part about this is that China is the one brokering this, because it shows that they are bringing the diplomatic aspect of their national instruments of power. And what we see with China on the military side is that they have a significant increase in bringing their equipment into the region and their foreign military sales. And if there's Chinese equipment there, we cannot integrate it with U.S. equipment.
Alongside China's growing influence in the greater Middle East, General Kurilla was also asked about Russia's deepening relations with Iran and whether the United States could mitigate the regional impact of these bolstered ties.
So it is very concerning any time we see adversaries working together. We do know that they have shipped hundreds of their advanced unmanned aerial vehicles to the Ukraine. These are the same ones that have hit our service members in both Iraq and in Syria. They are improving upon them based on what they are learning inside the Ukraine. I am concerned then with the support that Russia can give back. As you know, the Iran state media announced the approval of, don't know the exact number yet, will come out of the agreement, but the Su-35, which is a 4th Gen Plus fighter, which has a lot of our partners in the region concerned as well. Chairman, I think this will take a whole-of-government approach to include all of the instruments of national power on this to be able to prevent that.
General Kurilla further addressed Russia's role in Syria.
Syria is very important to Russia. They have taken very little out of Russia since their invasion. They've taken a small number of forces, some munitions, but generally it has stayed about the same. What we are seeing, though, is an increase recently in the unprofessional and unsafe behavior of the Russian Air Force in the region. So they fly over our bases with ground attack aircraft with weapons on them, in an attempt to try and be provocative, but really it's unsafe, unprofessional. Not what we expect of a professional Air Force. They want to try and renegotiate the deconfliction protocols that they violate every day. It's not new, but we have seen a significant spike since about 1 March in Syria.
Despite of dangerous altercations between Russia and the United States in Syria, coincided by a state visit of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to Moscow, after which the leader of Damascus announced his intention to allow the construction of additional Russian military bases on Syrian soil. Moreover, President Bashar al-Assad also highlighted that in the view of Damascus, World War III had already commenced.
أنا أعتقد بأن الحرب العالمية الثالثة قائمة، لكن اختلف الشكل. يعني بالسابق كانت الحرب العالمية هي حروب تقليدية، جيوش من عدة دول تعمل ضد عدة دول أخرى. الآن هذا الوضع قائم، ولكن بسبب الأسلحة المتقدمة وخاصة السلاح النووي فهناك قوة ردع عن الحرب التقليدية، لذلك تذهب الحروب باتجاه الحروب بالوكالة. لذلك زيلينسكي هو اليوم يقوم بالحرب نيابة عن الغرب مع جيشه طبعا من النازيين. نفس الشيء الإرهابيين هي جيوش تعمل نيابة عن الغرب في سوريا وفي مناطق أخرى.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. If you're blessed by our productions and would like to help TV7 Israel's ongoing operations, which are exclusively donation-based, please consider making a financial contribution. You can do so at www.tv7israelnews.com or at tv7.fi. Separately, I'd like to encourage you to pray for our persecuted brothers and sisters worldwide, as well as for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hessen, wishing you an Erev Mevorach, and God willing, we'll see you again tomorrow at the same time.